Behind the Line Xtra for your Saturday, September 13th, 2019. I'm your host, KC. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Hit the like and subscribe button on whichever platform you're listening on. Leave your comment in the section below. Before I get into everything today, I was watching this morning the NFL Football Life on Terry Bradshaw. You know, the NFL does some amazing documentaries on former players. They release one on Friday nights every week of the regular season. And if you're like me and you were born in the mid to late 80s, you really don't understand how big of a legend Terry Bradshaw was in the 1970s. People our age, Terry Bradshaw to me is the guy I watched on Sunday mornings on Fox NFL Sunday. Still watch them. Their pregame show is my favorite pregame show. I like watching Michael Irvin, Rich Eisen, and them on the NFL Network. Then at 10, 11 o'clock, turning it over to Fox to watch Terry Bradshaw, Howie Long, Jimmy Johnson, those guys. So I never got the pleasure to watch Terry Bradshaw when he was playing. I knew about the 4 Super Bowl wins. I knew about all that. I didn't really know about the struggles, though, that he went through, especially early on in his career. I didn't know about the conflict that he had with Chuck Noll. Those guys did not like each other. I didn't know that. I didn't know that Terry Bradshaw, after he retired, didn't return to Pittsburgh for 20 years. That when he went into the Hall of Fame, he had Vern Lundquist introducing instead of Chuck Noll or Franco Harris or somebody from the Steelers. So his relationship with Noll and the city of Pittsburgh in general was very contentious for a lot of years. Terry Bradshaw was viewed as a dumb country hick, had a lot of struggles with the media, missing a tooth early in his career, just didn't have a really positive image and struggled a lot with it. Even when they were winning Super Bowls, the perception of Terry Bradshaw did not change. And of course, now we look at him as this great entertainer, this great analyst, just a fun-loving guy. I highly recommend, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Especially if you're somebody my age that was not alive during Terry Bradshaw's prime. Phenomenal documentary that the NFL Network did. All right, going to get into the NFL bets in just a second, but I wanted to go over one or two stories before we get there. If you watch the Thursday night game between Carolina and Tampa, you probably noticed this as well. Something's going on with Cam Newton. I don't know what it is. But this is not the same guy that we saw in 2015 when he was the MVP of the league and the Offensive Player of the Year. Ever since that season, he has been on a steady decline. He has struggled since 2015 in that Super Bowl run. Now, last year, I understand he was hurt. I believe he was hurt the entire season and played through it. And when they were eliminated from playoff contention, they finally sat Newton for the rest of the year. But I actually believe he was a hindrance to the Panthers last year. His play was that bad. But what the fuck is going on this year? He's not injured. At least if he is, it's not been public knowledge that he's injured. Yet he's still god-awful. That performance Thursday night against Tampa, which is arguably one of the worst teams in the NFL, was embarrassing for Cam Newton. Absolutely unacceptable to be outplayed by Jameis Winston at home. Cam Newton made Jameis Winston look like a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback on Thursday night, completing 49% of his passes. This from a guy that was a top 10 quarterback in the league just a few years ago. It appears to me that Ron Rivera has lost all faith in Cam. I understand. I get it. I mean, the Panthers have a chance to win the game late in the fourth quarter. They're in the red zone, about the 2 or 3 yard line. Now, if this is the New England Patriots or the Saints or the Rams, Seattle Seahawks, in the same situation. Well, maybe not the Seahawks, but the other 3 teams. Packers. If it's any team with a respectable quarterback under center, their coach is putting the ball in their hands with the game on the line. What does Ron Rivera do? Direct snap to Christian McCaffrey. On 4th down, direct snap to Christian McCaffrey, who gets stuffed, and the Panthers lose the game. 2nd game in a row they've lost at home to open this season. This 0-2 start in Carolina is 100% on the shoulders of Cam Newton. The defense is good. Carolina always has a respectable defense. This year is no different. One of the best linebackers in the league with Luke Kuechly. McCaffrey, versatile in the backfield. Similar to Alvin Kamara, but not quite on his level. Cam has a decent group of receivers. It's not that it's just Cam and a bunch of scrubs on the field. He's got talent around him to be winning games. So what the fuck's going on? There's no reason for this team to be 0-2. None. That game Thursday night, they should have won. Except they're getting poor play at the quarterback position. You live and die by your head coach and the quarterback in the NFL. We all know that. So I'm just wondering how a league MVP in 2015 becomes one of the worst quarterbacks in the league 4 years later. In my opinion, this is all mental. Cam is gifted physically. We can't take that away from him. He's never been the most accurate passer, completes about 59% on his career. But he used to have this ability to extend plays. And at one time, he was one of the hardest quarterbacks in the league to sack, outside of maybe a Big Ben. I mean, you just couldn't get Cam Newton to the ground. But it appears that Cam has lost his edge. He's lost that swagger that we're used to seeing him with. You see more of Cam Newton pouting nowadays than the guy who used to pretend he was ripping his jersey off to expose the S on his chest like he's fucking Superman. Cam Newton has not thrown a touchdown yet, and we're 2 games into the season. Tampa Bay doesn't have one fucking Pro Bowler on the defensive side of the ball. And he couldn't throw 1 touchdown on Thursday night. At home. I think one of the big issues with Cam, besides whatever he's got going on in that head of his, is that he's never adapted throughout his career. He came into the league, he could make plays with his legs, he extended plays, coverages broke down, or he was able to move the chains just by running the ball. That part of his game seems to have disappeared. He's older. Those plays years ago that he was able to extend, that's just not happening anymore. The problem is Cam has never put in the work to become a pocket passer. It's been proven time and time again, and we've talked about it here on the show, that in the NFL, the running quarterback is not a long-term solution. You cannot have a long career in this league by being just a running quarterback. We have a ton of examples. RG3, Tim Tebow. Michael Vick actually might be the best example of a guy who was prolific his first few years in the year, but never learned how to become a pocket passer, never put the work in, and couldn't extend his career because of that. Eventually, your speed drops down a notch. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. You've got to be able to throw the ball out of the pocket to succeed long-term in the NFL. Now, Lamar Jackson primarily used his legs last year when he was thrust into the game to replace Joe Flacco. But this year, last week against Miami, he looked like a completely different quarterback to me. He had made his adjustments in the offseason, working to become more of a polished pocket passer. Looked great last week. Cam has never done that. And it's finally catching up to him. Now, I'm not saying the Panthers are done, but it's looking bleak through 2 weeks of the year. They have a relatively easy schedule the next few weeks. They're at Arizona, at Houston, home to Jacksonville, and on the road against Tampa. 3 of those 4 games are winnable. But Carolina has dug themselves an early hole, and they've got to win 3 of the next 4 to have a prayer at a wild card. Because they damn sure not winning the NFC South with the Saints sitting in that division. All right, let's move on. The mass exodus in Miami continues. We talked about this on Tuesday, the potential mutiny after that embarrassing loss to Baltimore in the Miami locker room. ESPN released a story yesterday that former first-rounder Micah Fitzpatrick from Alabama has requested and received permission to seek a trade out of Miami. We all knew the Dolphins were going to suck this year. When you trade your best players before the season starts, you're sending a strong message to your roster that you don't give a fuck about the upcoming season. Now, Fitzpatrick has said he wants out of Miami because, quote, he's unhappy playing multiple positions. That's bullshit. I don't doubt that he's unhappy about that. But he wants out of Miami because the team is a dumpster fire that's headed to an 0-16 record. Fitzpatrick's one of the better young secondary players in the league. I actually wouldn't mind the Saints picking him up and adding him to their young secondary. I think he'd fit in well in New Orleans. Lord knows they could use him instead of having fucking P.J. Williams playing heavy snaps on the defense. But the Dolphins' asking price right now is just too high. They're asking for a first-rounder in the 2020 draft. Now, I'm sure there's a team out there that's going to give that to them eventually. But I don't want the Saints to give up a first-round pick for Fitzpatrick. He isn't needed in the secondary that badly. I can't remember an NFL team that's in as bad of shape as the Dolphins are in right now. The Cleveland Browns have been dreadful for 30 years. Looks like they might be again this year. But I don't remember hearing guys before the season starts or in the first 1 to 2 weeks of the year trying to jump ship this early. The players in Miami can't get out of there quick enough. At this rate, they're going to be playing with undrafted free agents towards the end of the season because they're not going to have enough guys to fill the roster. All right, now let's go ahead and get to the NFL bets of the weekend. It's going to be a great day tomorrow of NFL football. I'm excited about this weekend. First game, Colts at Titans. Current line, Tennessee minus 3.5. I was thoroughly impressed with the Titans last week. All the hype coming into the season surrounding Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns. This Tennessee team went into Cleveland with a hostile crowd early and punched the Browns right in the mouth, and they never let their foot off the throat. As I said last week, the Titans are effective when they get Derrick Henry going early. I feel like they followed the same blueprint here against Indy. Colts run defense gave up 6 yards per carry last week against a Melvin Gordon-less Chargers team. Marcus Mariota looked like a franchise quarterback last week that he was drafted to be. Averaged 17.7 yards per completion. The defense was dominant, as always. Forced 3 interceptions and a pick 6. Completely shut down Baker Mayfield and the Browns offense. Now, I have to admit, I was impressed with the Colts and Jacoby Brissett last week in Los Angeles. Down 24-9 in the fourth quarter. Defense stepped up with a red zone interception. Brissett led the offense with 2 touchdowns late to force overtime. This Colts team on the offense and defensive line is very good. If they had Andrew Luck, like we talked about before, this team would be a playoff team. Now, the Chargers' defense is mediocre. And I believe the Titans' defense is one of the better units in the AFC. A big reason the Colts were able to stay in the game last week was the running game. They were able to create third and short situations. They were able to extend drives. I don't think that's going to happen Sunday against this Tennessee defense, which held the Browns to 1 of 10 on third down last week. I know Indy is an upgrade on the offensive line when compared to Cleveland, but I think Tennessee will be able to pressure Jacoby Brissett in this game and stop the run, which didn't happen last weekend. I realize that the Colts are 13-2 straight up, 12-3 against the spread their last 15 games against the Titans. The Titans struggle against Indianapolis. However, guess who the quarterback was in those 2 straight up losses? Yep, Jacoby Brissett. This is a division game between 2 teams that know each other really well. I usually take points in situations like this. But I feel like the Titans defense give the Colts problems on Sunday, and the physicality of Henry and the Titans offensive line wears on the Colts in the second half. I'm going to buy the hook here for the extra insurance. I'm going to take Tennessee -3. Next game up, Cowboys at Redskins. Current line, Dallas -6. Damn it, is the world high on Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys right now. All we've heard all week is about how great this team is. How they're Super Bowl contenders. Might as well crown their asses right now. And we're in the perfect spot tomorrow to fade the Cowboys. First, I absolutely love home dogs in the NFL. What makes it even better is a home dog in a division game. And even better than that, a road favorite that is riding high off a media storm after a quote-unquote big win from the week before. Look, the New York Giants are fucking garbage. Awful defense, ineffective veteran quarterback that hasn't had a good season in 5 or 6 years. It's not like the Cowboys knocked off an elite level team last week like the Patriots or the Rams. It was the New York fucking Giants. Now, Washington was on fire last week in the first half in Philadelphia. Jumped out to a big lead early on the road. Completely fell apart in the second half. The Redskins' lack of a running game really worries me here. And I feel like that was a big reason last weekend that they succumbed to Philadelphia. Let them come back. However, Adrian Peterson was inactive last week. I know he's well past his prime. He's not the AP of 10 years ago that we saw in Minnesota. But this guy still had a 1,000-yard season last year. And he still has the ability to burst through the line for big gains. I think he was sorely missed last week in Philadelphia. I think if he was there, Washington has a better chance of winning that game. Case Keenum also looked good last week. A guy who is known for turning the ball over. Had 0 interceptions. Washington didn't turn over the ball not one time. Keenum passed for 370 yards. They just took their foot off the gas once they built a double-digit lead. And that happens a lot in the NFL. Now, there's no doubt that the talent disparity between these 2 teams is big, but I feel like that Philadelphia is more talented than Dallas. Washington hung with Philly for 3 quarters last week on the road. I feel like here at home, they'll hang with the Cowboys the entire game. Division game. I'm not saying the Redskins win here, but I like them to keep it close enough to cover. 80% of the betting public money is on the Cowboys to cover this game. All the more reason to back Washington. Taking Washington +6. Next game up, we have Seattle traveling to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. Current line, Pittsburgh -3.5. Battle of 2 teams who were disappointing in their season openers. Seattle barely scraped by at home against the Bengals, a game in which Cincinnati dominated throughout. Of course, we all saw Big Ben and the Steelers get embarrassed last Sunday night against the Patriots. Bad performance that Mike Tomlin said the Steelers weren't ready for prime time. Lucky for Tomlin in Pittsburgh, this game is against a West Coast team flying east for an early 1 p.m. kickoff. Seattle was fucking atrocious in that win against Cincinnati. 232 yards of offense. Defense gave up over 400 yards. If it wasn't for 3 untimely Bengals turnovers, a failed 4th down attempt, and a missed field goal, the Seahawks lose that game at home. They should have lost that game. They played that bad last week. Made Andy Dalton look like Peyton Manning. That's not an easy task. I feel like the Steelers are in a huge bounce back spot here at home. I don't think the team we saw last week is the real Pittsburgh Steelers. Just a bad game against the Patriots. This team is loaded with talent offensively and defensively. We all know how well Big Ben bounces back after embarrassing losses. But the Steelers defense we saw last week, I feel like will be much improved against a very, very weak Seattle offensive line. Seahawks gave up 4 sacks last week against Cincinnati. Russell Wilson was hit 9 or 10 times. Under pressure the entire game. The weakness of the Pittsburgh defense is in the secondary, so getting pressure on Wilson is going to be critical to ensure that the Steelers don't give up the deep ball. Now don't forget, this Steelers pass rush was one of the best in the NFL last year. Tied the league lead with 52 sacks. Returning stars TJ Watt and Cam Hayward should be able to generate plenty of pressure against a weak Seattle offensive line. I had the Seahawks edging out the Cowboys for the final wild card spot in my preseason playoff rankings, but after last week, I'm not so sure. This looks to be the weakest team in Seattle in the Pete Carroll era, but I'm not jumping off their bandwagon just yet. Now, I realize Juju Smith-Schuster is questionable with a toe injury. I think he'll play. James Conner was terrible last week. 21 yards on 10 carries. But the Steelers were trailing the entire game. So Conner didn't really have much of a chance to get into a rhythm. I think Conner has a big game on Sunday. Big Ben bounces back in a big way. Steelers defense returns to form, gets plenty of pressure on Russell Wilson, this anemic Seattle offense. The Seahawks to me look weak both defensively and offensively. I like the Steelers here by at least a touchdown. Still going to buy the hook for the extra insurance, taking Pittsburgh -3. San Francisco at Cincinnati. Current line is Cincinnati -1. Now, I realize the 49ers won last week, but like the Seahawks, they had no business winning that game in Tampa. If it wasn't for 2 absolutely ridiculous pick sixes thrown by Jameis Winston, Tampa Bay wins that game going away. Now, on the flip side of that coin, same thing happened with the Bengals. Just talked about how Cincinnati dominated Seattle the entire game in one of the toughest places to play in the NFL. Same situation. If not for 3 turnovers by the Bengals, couple of bad plays, they win that game on the road. Andy Dalton had one of the best games of his career last week. Never been a believer in him. But one thing he has done well throughout his career is win at home. San Francisco is on the second leg of back-to-back road games out east to start the season. There's also a huge distraction in San Francisco right now regarding the future of Jimmy Garoppolo. He was awful last week. 158 passing yards against a Tampa defense that, like we said earlier, doesn't have a Pro Bowler on the roster. Awful on third down. And if not for the San Francisco defense, Tampa Bay would have won that game by double digits. 49ers general manager John Lynch came out this week in the San Francisco media and basically said that Jimmy G is the quarterback for now in San Francisco. That is not good. His future in the Bay Area is uncertain at this point. And after the poor showing last week and the injury last season, his future in San Francisco is not guaranteed. Now, I'm not convinced that the Bengals are a strong team in the AFC by any stretch, but I do believe they have a good enough offense to handle San Francisco at home with a small point spread. Bengals are 5-0 against the line their last 5 games. Will be 6-0 after Sunday, taking Cincinnati -1. Saints at Rams. Current line, LA, -1.5. This is far and away the biggest game in the NFL weekend. Perhaps one of the biggest games all season, considering what happened in the NFC Championship game in January. Now let me tell you something about Sean Payton and Drew Brees. They avenge big losses. If you don't think when the NFL schedule came out in the spring that they weren't already preparing for week 2 in Los Angeles against the Rams, you're out of your fucking mind. This is a big game to a hungry New Orleans team that feels like they were fucked over in the NFC Championship last year, and rightfully so. They've been stewing on that loss for 8 months now. New Orleans has an elite pass rush, one of the better defensive lines in the NFL. Led by Cam Jordan, the Saints get after the quarterback. We saw that Monday night against Houston. Jared Goff was pressured pretty well by Carolina last week. Sacked 3 times. But this Saints front 7 will be on him all afternoon tomorrow. Now, I realize the Saints defense as a whole had some weak moments on Monday night, especially in the secondary. But as we've seen the past couple of seasons, the Saints start slow, especially the defense. Secondary started slow last year. Don't forget, this same Saints defense gave up 48 points at home to Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tampa Bay in the opener last year. Then they came together to become one of the better defensive units in the NFL. New Orleans is better than they were last year. That's the scary part. The offense is more versatile. The addition of Jared Cook at tight end. Drew Brees loves to hit the tight end in the red zone, something he's been missing since the departure of Jimmy Graham. The Rams defense and every other team in the league has no answer for Alvin Kamara or Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas catches something like 85% of his targeted passes. Far and away the best in the NFL. Now, I'm not being a homer here, but I feel like the Saints are the hungrier team in this matchup. Home field in Los Angeles is not an advantage. We all know that. One of the easier places to play in the league. Brees and Payton have been planning the offense for this matchup the entire offseason. Sean Payton is an elite NFL coach. You give him time to prepare, and he's going to burn you. That's why the Saints are so good after a bye week. Expect any and everything from the Saints offense tomorrow. Now, this game opened up at the Rams -3. Has already been bet down to LA -1.5. Prime example here of reverse line movement. Nearly 70% of public money is backing the Rams. Yet, the line has dropped 1.5. That tells you the smart money is on New Orleans. I like the Saints to cover and win here, taking New Orleans +1.5. All right, so to give a quick recap here, we've got Tennessee -3, Washington +6, Pittsburgh -3, Cincinnati -1, Saints +1.5. Doing something I don't usually do here, and I got a few favorites here, but I really like the picks this week. All right, guys, I'm out of here. I will be back Tuesday to recap the weekend, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Leave a comment in the section below. Hit the like and subscribe button. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the games. I will see you on Tuesday.